What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. Islam was created by the Catholic Church. Did you hear what I said? I said Islam was created by the Catholic Church. Now, I've been saying that in my videos, and some of my subscribers was very pleasantly surprised that I knew that. You see, I'm a history major. I'm a big-time history buff, right? All religions are mythology. They're all fake, all right? They're all fake, mythology, okay? All created by man. And you got to keep remembering, the Catholic Church is the #1 European institution that we should blame for almost all the calamities since their inception, okay? They are the ultimate puppet master, the Catholic Church, right? They're also the ultimate pedophiles as well. That in fact, has been the documented truth for thousands of years, right? Now, I'm gonna teach you guys, so you know that your Islam, which you think is fighting against Christianity, you think that Islam and Christianity are really opposed to each other, but in fact, they complement each other. These are all Abrahamic religions. They're all branches off the same religion. And the Catholic Church, are you paying attention? The Catholic Church, that group, those people, all right, they are cosplaying African culture. Do you understand? They are cosplaying African culture. Look at the Catholic Church. Look at the Vatican. These are white people dressed up like Egyptians. They just don't look right because they're white, all right? The Catholic Church is designed like Egypt, just the white people version, all right? Then you got the other denominations of Christianity, which the savage barbarians took a hold after the Catholic Church went to Europe, right, and destroyed the Druids, destroyed all the Europeans who were practicing their ancient, traditional, European, they believed all kinds of stuff. It's not, they weren't like one God, you know. It was kind of like how Africans were doing it. You know, you had your deities and your gods, you know, all represented aspects of nature, right? Aspects of life. This is before, see, Europeans, white, barbarian savages, all right? Before the Catholic Church came to civilize them, right? They were connected to Earth. Now, there's some Europeans who are still connected to Earth, right? Like the Finns, right? Like those Nordics. Some of them still practice their traditional spiritual systems before Christianity came along, murdered them into submission, enslaved them into submission, and they became an arm, a cog in the machine, right? You ever wondered why the United States, Europe, UN back Islamic terrorist organizations who fight Africans? You ever wonder that? You ever wonder why these so-called super Christian nations always seem to make deals with these Islamic groups who they deem as the enemy, right? When it comes to attacking Africans? It's because this whole time, the Catholic Church, these white people, all right, and keep in mind, the Catholic Church is cosplaying not only African culture, but also cosplaying former Roman Empire, i.e. the Holy Roman Empire that came after the Roman Empire, when those savage barbarian freaking Visigoths pretended to be the Romans, when the Romans were pretending to be the Greeks, and when the Greeks started to pretend to be the Egyptians. That Bible that you guys think is the word of God is the word of a white man who killed and murdered people. That Bible that you worship, that Bible that you think is really a special book, is a copy of the Septuagint. Do you know what the Septuagint is? The Septuagint is a book that the Greeks wrote when they were copying Egyptian scrolls. It's a cosplay. All right? It's the European version of the reboot. Everything started when African people, as nice as we are, gave the Greeks culture. The Greeks cosplayed us because they wanted our gods to look like them. When Alexander the Great took over, Alexander, after desertification, forced all Africans to move down into what y'all like to call sub-Saharan Africa, and we subsequently created all those West and Central African great countries after Egypt, right? We just went home. We just went back and went home. those Greeks started to cosplay their heroes, the gods that they used to worship. See, the Greeks used to worship us. All of the great people that people call Herodotus and all these goddamn, they're all students of Africa. Unashamedly students of Africa, right? So then when the Greek city-states, all right, city-states, not countries, but city-states, the states is like a country, but city-states, when they finally lost and broke up because of corruption and capitalism, right? Rome took over and cosplayed the Greeks because they was worshiping the Greeks. They was looking up to the Greeks who had all this new culture that none of these European savages ever had, right? That's what happened. They were like, oh, that's wonderful. Let's do that. And then when the Romans got too big, right, because they spread out too thin and because they was just ridiculously corrupt. Romans were a ridiculously disgusting society. I mean, you want to talk about disgusting. They had morals. What is that? What is morals? Morals? Ha! Morals? Shit. What? Morals? There were no morals. Right? If you watch some of those movies, the HBO shows like Rome and all that, they told you how they were. Right? They were disgusting. And then when they enslaved those Germanic, Francophone, barbarian savages, which, by the way, if you watch Game of Thrones and you see the Great Wall, you know, the big wall and the White Walkers, that is based off a true event. The Romans had a wall that cut off what they believed was the civilized world, right? And on the other side was those Anglo-Saxon barbarian savages, the White Walkers. There legitimately was a wall, and they would send Romans to that wall, way the hell out there, to secure the Roman Empire, the civilized part, away from those savage barbarians. But at some point, those Visigoths, those goddamn Gaul, right? Because Romans was losing population. They didn't have enough people to form their armies. For the same reason, Europeans are going extinct now. Because of capitalism, right? And the development, meaning the women weren't having babies, right? They weren't having babies like that no more, right? So they had to fill their armies with these Francophone Visigoth savage barbarians. They trained up the barbarians that they were subjugating for hundreds of years, and that was their downfall. So you trained up your enemy thinking that they was going to stay loyal to you, and eventually they stabbed them in the back and sacked Rome in a day. Right? That's what happened. And on top of that, you had the goddamn Persians and the Turkmen coming from the goddamn steppes of Eurasia, giving them problems on the other side. Right? I.e. Turkey. I.e. goddamn, what was it? Turkey was part of Eastern Rome, I think. That was part of Turkey. Turkey was geographically located in a great place. They had a big city there that could be defended. They had a great wall. But then when that cannon became popular, when that cannon broke them walls down and finished off the rest of them Romans that was hanging on to their civilization, right? And then after that, a few decades later, the Holy Roman Empire started to create themselves. They were trying to cosplay the goddamn Romans. The Catholic Church, that's what they are, the Holy Roman Empire. A bunch of savage barbarians mixed with a bunch of Italic Mediterraneans who tried to recreate Rome and created the Catholic Church. That's why if you go to the Vatican, it's a state all by itself. And they are cosplaying African culture. And they created Islam, which is just a different sect of their religion, their cult. And they gave it to all those goddamn nomads, all those goddamn camel herders, all those goddamn fishermen, all those goddamn offspring of Roman and Greek and Egyptian conquest. All right, because that's all Arabs are. They're not even a race. They're the first mixed mulattoes of Africans, Europeans, and Asians congregating and trading in that central point where everybody meet. They gave these guys this religion, gave them a purpose so they can use them for their own purpose. You can't motivate somebody to go raid, to go destroy, unless they have a reason to do so. Religion is the tool to do so. The same way Christianity, another Abrahamic religion, was used to enslave the very same Africans and send them to America. That's why all the Americans, a bunch of African Americans talking about Jesus Christ, worshiping on a white Jesus, and they can't give up Jesus. They can't give up the greatest weapon of mass destruction ever sent to the Americas, ever sent to Africa. ever sent to Asia. Everywhere they took their Christianity, they raped, murdered, and pillaged the religion into the people over generations. That's why I say Islam and Christianity is the worst thing to ever happen to Africa, period. I don't give a fuck how Muslim you are. I don't care how Christian you are. You are a cog in the machine. You belong to an anti-intellectual organization, the biggest cult in the world. It makes you lose your common sense to worship a white god, right? If you're Islam, you still worship. They gave him a fucking rock. They people pilgrimage to go rub on a goddamn piece of rock in the middle of the fucking desert. Nobody even knows what the fuck it is. It's just a big ass rock. And they rub on the shit. Ridiculous. I don't care who you are. Because those are the truth, not the shit you want to believe. Not the mythology you choose to believe, because it's real easy to believe that. It's real easy and intellectually lazy to just believe that shit. But if we go through the Quran and we go through the Bible and we ask you, do you truly believe this? You be like, nah, I don't believe that part of the Bible. No, that part ain't true. Oh, I don't believe that part of the Quran. That part ain't true. Did you know that Muslims believe in Jesus Christ? The only difference between a Muslim and a goddamn Christian is that Muslims don't believe Jesus Christ was immaculate conception. He's just a prophet. The slight differences that change between Catholic and Islam, just like the slight difference between Catholicism or Coptic or Protestant or Pentecostal or Baptist. You talk about slight differences. And sometimes the differences get so big that we can go ahead and classify it as a new religion. But Islam ain't nothing but Christianity. Islam ain't nothing but the New Testament. You got the Old Testament, the New Testament, and Islam, the New Testament. That's it. But listen, I'm going to put that information right here. Do what you want with it. You can either practice cognitive dissonance like everybody on the planet who practice either one of these cult religions. You can go ahead and do that, right? I know that's what most of y'all going to do because that's the easy route. Because thinking for yourself and looking at real history and other data and other book, documented history, that's too hard for y'all. Because what you believe and what the truth is going to fuck your brain up because you can't handle it intellectually. You can't handle it spiritually because then you're going to have to ask the question again. Who am I and what is my purpose here? That question right there is too hard for y'all to process. That's why y'all need somebody to tell you, like sheep. But anyway, I'm here to tell you. Like I said, do with it what you want. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Just Afro Think Tank, learn something, teach them. I'm out.
The Islamic religion is huge today. It's also a very exclusive religion. Nobody from the outside is allowed in. If there are pilgrimages to Mecca, only those who are Islamic are allowed to go to these pilgrimages. Evangelism in Islamic countries are totally forbidden, it's punishable, and even can be led to death. Now who and what is Islam? Millions of people, including many of our favorite celebrities, are converting to Islam, many of which make their way to Mecca each year to pay visit and worship at the shrine of Muhammad. However, there is another religion that propagate pilgrimages as well, and that is Catholicism. The Catholic Church have pilgrimages to Lourdes and Miriam sites and to Fatima. I have discussed the pilgrimage site of Lourdes in a previous video title, Pergamum, the Throne of Satan. Pilgrimages is a symbol of the great pagan religions of the past, so we should be very careful and aware of these subtle devices. Who was Muhammad? Let's briefly look. Muhammad Mustafa was born in 570 AD and died in 632 AD. He fled Medina in 622 AD after his wife Khadijah's death. He was 25 years old and she was 40 years old when they got married. Her cousin Waraqah was a Roman Catholic. Khadijah, Muhammad's wife, was also of the Roman Catholic faith. She was super rich. Thus she had great wealth and power in her hands. She employed the young man Muhammad, whom she married. Muhammad later marched on Mecca in 630 AD, 2 years before his death, and 4 years before Omar became caliph. Muhammad, who couldn't write, had a scribe wrote down all that he heard and saw, which made the Quran different, well, apparently from all other religious writing, because it was a direct dictated book, so it is not transcribed by a prophet. That's the teaching. That is, it's the very word of God. Therefore, it should always remain in the Arabic language. That is what is thought by Islam. The Quran was compiled in 650 AD. The symbol of Islam is the sickle, moon and star. Where does this symbol comes from, and who is Allah? The crescent moon symbol was used since 2100 BC in paganism. Polytheism has extensively used the symbol of the crescent moon as far back as Abraham, as hundreds of archaeological examples verify. All the Arabs at the Kaaba in Mecca worshipped the moon god Hubal. Crescent moon is the official symbol of Islam on top of every mosque in the world, and beside the Kaaba on top of the Maqam Ibrahim. It is the last remaining polytheistic remnant of ancient moon worship under a new sanitized monotheistic veil. According to the Encyclopedia of Religion, Allah was the moon god who married the sun goddess, and together they produced three goddesses who was called the daughters of Allah: Al-Lat, Al-Uzza and Manat. Reference point, Encyclopedia of Religion, mentioned that Allah corresponded to the Babylonian god, Bel or Baal, and the Arabs knew of him long before Muhammad worshipped him as the supreme god. Before Islam, the Arabs recognized many gods and goddesses, and each tribe had its own deity. There were also nature deities. Allah was the god of the local Quraysh tribe, which was Muhammad's tribe before he brought Islam to lead his people out of their polytheism. The daughter of Allah was the intercessors for the people. Again, their names were Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat, which were three goddesses. The first two daughters of Allah had names that were feminine forms of Allah. Even though Muslims today have denied this fact, they do not worship Allah's daughters and view them as pagan deities. Having said that, it is important to note that Muhammad himself commanded his followers to offer prayers to these Allah's daughters. He later retracted it and blamed it on the devil. It is this true event in Muhammad's life, which was the topic of Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses. A book we certainly do not recommend reading for its profanity and racism. From a historical point of view, as a youth, Muhammad engaged in the worship of all the 360 pagan gods in the Kaaba of Mecca, owned and run by the Quraysh tribe of which Muhammad was a member in good standing. As Muhammad grew up, Christians influenced him, monotheists, who condemned the polytheism at the Kaaba. In Muhammad's life, the Christians convinced him that polytheism was wrong and sought to reject the 360 pagan gods he had grown up with. Through the influence and education of Roman Catholic Christians and his wife, they influenced Muhammad into the idea of monotheism. However, because he was proud of his tradition of nationalist ethnic Arabism, Muhammad chose not to embrace an entirely new faith such as Christianity. Rather, he decided to reform his indigenous pagan religion. Muhammad then took the highest pagan deity of the Kaaba in Mecca and selected it as the new monotheistic god of his. This god was considered the highest god in Kaaba among other gods. The strategy of Muhammad was simple. Muhammad actually banned the other 359 pagan gods and preferred the remaining one to be the one and only one deity, rather than converting the Arab people to the monotheism of Christianity, what Muslims call Allah now. Islam has therefore been born. The Roman Catholic Church. But before I go further, there are wonderful people, sincere worshippers, who believe with all their hearts they are doing the right things in these religions and churches, but there is a wool, a blindness that only the Holy Spirit can untie. Let's get back to it. The Roman Catholic Church have shown great similarities with Islamic religion. Hidden in the bowels of the abyss, a Jesuit named Alberto Rivera claimed that the Cardinal Bey, the Jesuit general, personally instructed him in the origin of Islam. According to Rivera, the Roman Catholic Church started Islam on purpose to take Arabs under their control and to secure Jerusalem. However, this is highly ridiculed in the literature, and they will state that nothing like that happened. But let me digress. Who was first? Catholicism or Islam? Catholicism, of course. Now, Catholicism had a major problem. The Orthodox Church had now split from the Roman Catholic Church during the 2nd century. The Eastern Orthodox Church did not want to accept the Roman Catholic Pope's claim that he was the sole head of the Church, and war broke out between the two groups, Orthodox Church and Roman Catholics. However, this has been resolved after the Russian Revolution, but the two factions was never merge again. This created a problem for Catholicism because true Christianity had spread in the Middle East. Now Rome had devised a plan to eradicate or replace true Christianity, the Orthodox Church in the Middle East. Coincidentally, Islam and Catholicism share common practices. From praying 5 times a day are the rosemary beads to the Hamsa. Catholicism call it God all-seeing eye. Even the nuns looks like Islamic woman's attire. Like Islamic and Catholicism are very patriarchal in regards to leadership and domination. A lot of people won't agree with these type of teaching, but the hard facts are there, written and hidden in books. The deception is very blinding and it's hidden in plain sight. So as we start to awake in these last days, I'll pray for divine guidance to the true and living God, Yeshua. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen. Thank you for supporting this channel by watching these videos in its entirety. God bless.
Here's a picture of the Pope kissing the Quran. The Catholic Catechism in our library out here, you can read it for yourself. Some of the things they believe are pretty interesting. They say, in the Catholic Catechism, 841, the Church's relationship with the Muslims is the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator, the first place among whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us they adore the one merciful God. There's an excellent little bitty comic book called The Prophet you can get from our ministry. It's like $2 or something like that, by Jack Chick. He goes through the history of the Muslim church and how they started. Very few people realize it was the Catholics that started Islam. They started the whole religion purposely to try to get the Holy Land back for the Catholics. They built up the Islam, they funded Muhammad, they trained him, they sent a Catholic nun out of the monastery. They said, we want you to come out of your convent, go find a young promising Muslim, marry him, and train him to raise up an army of Arabs to go take back the Holy Land for the Mother Church. Quite an interesting story if you want to read about that. It started to work, but then it failed because Islam got so big, they said, well, forget you Catholics, we're doing what we want. And I don't think most Muslims, which is now, what, 10, 20% of the world population, Islam, I don't think most of them know that they really started off as a front for the Catholic Church. So let's cover just a little bit on Muslims. Ask the Muslim, how do you know Muhammad was a prophet? They'll say, well, he had a mole on his back. Holy moly. That's how you know he's a prophet, because he's got a mole on his back. I've got a mole on my back. Got one right here on my cheek. Man, I must be a double prophet. Got 2 moles. Albert, you got any moles? Yeah. Wow, bow down and worship Albert, you know. In one of the Muslim verses says, Muhammad asked the question, when I am dead and buried in the ground and go back to dust, is that all? What will happen to me? Muhammad himself had no clue if he was going to heaven. This verse in the Quran says, when he reached the setting of the sun, he found it set in a pond of murky water. Would that be scientifically accurate to say the sun sets in a pond of murky water? No. I would say the earth turns around and the sun, appears to go around the earth. This is not scientifically accurate. The Quran has loads of scientific errors. It's not a holy book. Allah commands any person who leaves Islam or encourages others to do so should be seized and slain. There are over 100 commands in the Quran to kill people who won't convert. Anybody that won't convert has to be killed. And I see Bush and these guys saying, we're trying to bring democracy in Iraq. The problem with Iraq is their religion. They are being taught every couple days in the synagogue, you've got to kill anybody who won't convert. And there probably are millions of Muslims who don't like this and they don't want to do that, but in order to be a good Muslim, you have to kill anybody else who won't become Muslim. That's the rules, okay? Islam is a religion where God requires you to send your son to die for him. The Bible is where God sent his son to die for you. Exactly the opposite, okay? If you study the history of Jerusalem and the problems with Islam, it's phenomenal. Keep in mind, they both come from the 2 sons of Abraham. Abraham, if he wouldn't have gone down into Egypt and got that Egyptian girl and had that one baby Ishmael, we wouldn't have this whole problem, because all the Arabs come from Ishmael. And the price of gas would not be over $2 a gallon if it hadn't been for Abraham and Hagar, okay? Probably more if the Jews had control of all of it. They like money too. But the Romans and Byzantines, trampled the city of Jerusalem. Chuck Missler's got all kinds of stuff on the Jerusalem and the problems they've had with Islam over the years. It's been trampled down by the Gentiles. The Bible says, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all people. We've got a ton of stuff in our college class CSE 200 series about Islam. One of the books we sell in our bookstore, and I don't get off into every single religion there is, but Islam is a growing, powerful religion, and you need to study it, is this little booklet, Who is this Allah? On page 27, he says, the last hour will not come before the Muslims fight the Jews and the Muslims kill them. That's their plan. The purest joy in Islam is to kill and be killed for Allah. After killing tens of thousands of non-Muslims in Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini said, in Persia, no people have been killed so far, only beasts. Because he thought they're not Muslims, so they're not really people. Allah created Adam, making him 60 cubits tall, according to Baqarah, volume 4. That's 90 foot tall. I mean, you believe that? Adam was 90 feet tall? In the 3rd surah, verse 105, it says, in the great and final redemption, only white faces shall be saved, all black faces will be condemned. In other words, you got to be white to go to heaven, to the Muslim heaven. Okay? In the 4th surah, it says, marry as many women as you like, 1, 2, 3, or 4. In Islam, they tell the people you can have 4 wives, but only 4. So what they'll do is they'll get 3 wives, and then the 4th one they have what they call convenience marriages. You can marry somebody for 15 minutes and then divorce them. So you can have all the concubines you want. Oh, I was only married 15 minutes. There's no law against that. That's their law. It says you can do that. In volume 1, it says, Abu reported, when any of you wakes from sleep, he performs ablution. He must clean his nose 3 times. For the devil spends the night in the interior of the nose. Good Muslims will get up in the morning, suck water into their nose, and blow it back out 3 times. That's got to hurt. Why? Well, because the devil lives in your nose. While you're sleeping, the devil crawls in. That's what they teach. Okay? Baqarah, volume 4 says that Satan stays in the upper part of the nose all night. Well, guess what expression we get from that? The boogeyman. Right? The boogerman. Abdu reported, the Apostle Allah said, people should avoid lifting their eyes toward the sky while supplicating in prayer. Otherwise, their eyes would be snatched away. If you're praying and you look up, your eyes will be popped out of your head. He reported non-Muslims eat in 7 intestines while a Muslim eats in 1. Is there a biological difference between non-Muslims and Muslims? Do non-Muslims have 7 intestines? You studied anatomy. Adam, is that in there? They're pretty much the same. If you do an autopsy, I bet you'd find they're the same. Don Boys, my friend up in Chattanooga, Tennessee area, has written a great book called Islam, America's Trojan Horse. Very few people realize it was the Catholics that started Islam. They started the whole religion purposely to try to get the Holy Land back for the Catholics. They built up the Islam, they funded Muhammad, they trained him, they sent a Catholic nun out of the monastery. They said, we want you to come out of your convent, go find a young promising Muslim, marry him, and train him to raise up an army of Arabs to go take back the Holy Land for the Mother Church. Quite an interesting story if you want to read about that. It started to work, but then it failed because Islam got so big, they said, well, forget you Catholics, we're doing what we want. And I don't think most Muslims, which is now, what, 10, 20% of the world population, Islam, I don't think most of them know that they really started off as a front for the Catholic Church.
Now, the Septuagint Bible is one of the oldest Bibles, and it was created within Egypt. And this is Ashraf Kwesi explaining this during an interview.
And never knowing it take 34 years. So there on the temples and tombs and monuments that have been there for 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000 years, we can see that many invasions that came into Africa, whether we look at the Greco-Roman period, and many of these ideas were literally plagiarized or copied directly from the temples. And if we look at, let's look at where did the earliest Bibles, if we want to start with that, where was it written at? Like the Septuagint version of the Bible. Okay?
The what?
The Septuagint version.
Septuagint.
The Septuagint version of the Bible. Where was it written at? It was written, this is the Greek's first Bible, by the way, okay? It was written in Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt. So why does Alexandria, Egypt play such a major role? Is there we can see the development of the Bible during the time of the Ptolemies, who at that time were on the throne of Egypt, who usurped the throne of Egypt. There we see that
who are not really Egyptians.
Who are not really Egyptians. We're talking
invaders.
We're talking about Alexander II. Okay, in many cases in the classroom we're taught to call Alexander the Great. When he first came in, this is where Egypt was introduced to the West. Even though it was introduced prior to that, and Greek philosophers like Thales, Pythagoras, and Socrates, and all these other Greek philosophers got many of their ideas, okay, that we see in Greek philosophy in the Western world today from ancient Egypt. So after Alexander, came in as a conqueror, and after his death, the Ptolemies took over, and this is where many of the temples were plundered. Okay, we're talking about temples that are still there, like Ipit called Karnak today. Also Enit, Neter, okay, of Dendera, Temple of Heru. These are places that are not mystical or used to be. They're there. And from many of the scrolls and papyruses that were taken from these temples and housed in the Alexandria Library. And from these ancient spiritual scrolls, papyruses, okay, in fact, where the name paper gets its name, from papyrus. So these spiritual writings were written on papyrus before it was written in paper, as we know as the Bibles today. So African people wrote these spiritual stories thousands of years ago. Many spiritual ideas that we see and we practice, okay, in terms of in Christianity, in terms of what the Christ means, and how in the Kemetic teachings. And by the way, I use the Kemetic teachings and not Egyptian teachings, because that's Egyptian is a Greek word. Kemetic is referring to the black people, African people of the Nile Valley, who actually created this spiritual idea of the resurrection of a spiritual Christ, okay, that represents a spirit within ourselves. This is how the Western world came in contact with these early spiritual teachings. Without it, we would not have Christianity.
My college mentor urged African Americans not to claim ancient Egypt, but Caribbean and African Americans descend from West African tribes like the Yoruba and Igbo, who come from ancient Egypt. Therefore, they can and should claim ancient Egyptian culture and land. Let me tell you about ancient Egyptian history so simple that a 5-year-old can understand. This is an ancient Egyptian man. This is a Yoruba, an Ibu, a Fulani, an Ewe, a Bantu. You see him? He looks black African. You can even DNA test this and show that they show quote-unquote sub-Saharan DNA. Clear? Okay. What happened to these black African ancient Egyptians? Ancient Egypt was invaded by many different Asiatic and European people. One of the invaders are the so-called Hyksos. Look at the Hyksos, how they look like. The Hyksos look like the so-called white Arabs. How do the people in North Africa look like today? Like the Hyksos. What happened to the Kemetic people? They migrated to other parts of North Africa, the black Berber nomads. They migrated south, the so-called Bantu people. They migrated southwest, the Yoruba, the Igbo people. This is this. This is this. This is also this. What about these people? These people are the ones who live in North Africa today.
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan!
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.